"Step out of the car, hands where I can see them," barked Officer Reynolds, his hand already on his holster. "Is there a problem, officer?" the man asked calmly, lowering the window without flinching. "You didn't signal back there. Step out. Now." It was a cold evening just outside Arlington, Virginia. Streetlights flickered against a sky heavy with rain, casting long shadows on the wet asphalt. A black SUV had just pulled into a quiet side road near a residential block, its blinkers barely off when the blue and red lights lit up behind it. Inside the SUV sat Major General Langston Briggs, a man whose quiet eyes had seen 3 war zones and 2 presidents. But tonight, his military rank, his medals, and even his name meant nothing. Not to these cops. Briggs wore a plain gray hoodie and jeans. No uniform, no insignia. Just a regular black man in a nice vehicle, and that was enough. The younger officer, Reynolds, no more than 30 and itching for control, motioned to his partner. "We got ourselves one of those fake tough guys. Probably stole the car." His partner, Officer Maddox, older and more cautious, walked slower. He tapped the hood with his flashlight. "Plates are clean, but let's run 'em anyway." Briggs remained still. He didn't raise his voice, didn't even flinch. "I'm happy to provide my ID," he said. "This is my vehicle." Reynolds didn't wait. He yanked the door open. "I didn't ask for a speech, I said step out." The general stepped out slowly, his hands raised, calm, practiced. The same calm he used to de-escalate village standoffs in Kandahar. But this wasn't war. This was home. Reynolds shoved him against the car with force. "Turn around. Hands on the hood." Maddox hesitated. "Reynolds, maybe we should just—" "He fits the profile," Reynolds snapped. "Probably got something in the trunk." Maddox didn't argue. Within seconds, they had Langston Briggs in cuffs, standing beside his own vehicle, in his own neighborhood, on his own time. Rain started to fall. Steady. Silent. The street was empty, but a porch light across the road flicked on. A neighbor peeked through a curtain. Langston's face didn't move, but inside, his jaw tightened. "Sir, I strongly advise, you run my name," he said quietly. "You're making a very serious mistake." Reynolds laughed. "Yeah? And I strongly advise you stop playing smart. You're under suspicion of stolen property and resisting commands. You'll get your chance to talk downtown." They tossed him into the back of the patrol car. No Miranda rights, no question, just assumption. Briggs sat in silence, staring out the window. The metal of the cuffs bit into his wrists, not from pain, from what it meant. After everything he'd done, everything he'd served, they didn't see a decorated military officer. They didn't even see a man. They just saw black. Reynolds popped open the SUV's trunk, flashlight dancing along the edges. "Let's see what our fake tough guy's hiding," he muttered. Inside, a standard military briefcase, a weathered duffel, a pair of neatly polished dress shoes, and a framed certificate. The beam paused. United States Army. Distinguished. Service medal. Maddox stepped closer. "Wait, that's not a replica." Reynolds rolled his eyes. "So what? Could be stolen. Could be fake." Maddox frowned now. "This ID says Major General Langston D. Briggs. Pentagon seal. Real hologram. This guy's for real." Reynolds snatched the ID. "Yeah, right." But his hand trembled. Back in the patrol car, Briggs closed his eyes, then opened them and quietly said, "Call this number." He leaned forward, giving the dispatch code he knew they'd understand. Echo 7-1. "This is an active flag officer. Pentagon authorization required." Silence. On the other end, Reynolds slammed the door shut. "Don't try to pull rank with me." Then Maddox's radio crackled. "Unit 11, we have received a command-level override. Repeat, command-level override. You are to stand down immediately, transfer custody and await further instruction." Reynolds paled. "What the hell does that mean?" Briggs, still calm, turned his head. "It means your night just changed." Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up. 2 men in suits stepped out, clean-shaven, earpieces, silent. They walked past the officers like they didn't exist. "Major General Briggs," one of them said, unlocking the backseat door. "We're here to escort you. Are you injured, sir?" Briggs stepped out, nodding. "No, just bruised ego." One of the agents handed Reynolds a sealed envelope. "This is a formal notification. You'll be contacted within 12 hours. Reynolds opened his mouth, then closed it. No apology, no defense, just the heavy sound of reality slamming shut. Briggs stood in the rain for a moment. He looked at Maddox, then at Reynolds, and said nothing. The agents led him away. Calm, controlled. But the storm, it had just begun. "Reynolds, what the hell did we just do?" Maddox whispered, watching the black SUV disappear into the mist. "We followed protocol," Reynolds snapped. "Guy looked suspicious." "He was a general, man. A damn general." The squad car sat parked outside the station, headlights off, tension thick as smoke. Inside, officers Reynolds and Maddox sat frozen. The radio had gone dead after the override. No explanations, no backup. Just silence. Reynolds gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. His jaw twitched. Maddox glanced at him. "You cuffed a flag officer. Do you have any idea what kind of chain reaction you just triggered?" "No badge, no uniform," Reynolds muttered. "How was I supposed to know?" "You could have listened when he said to run his name." "I don't take orders from criminals." Maddox stared. He wasn't a criminal. The rain still drizzled. But now it felt different, like judgment in the air. Heavy, watching. Inside the Pentagon, 3 levels beneath the surface, a meeting had already begun. Langston sat at a long glass table, his wrists now free but still red from the cuffs. Across from him stood General Meredith Doyle, a steel-eyed woman with decades of service etched into her posture. "You should have called sooner," she said, her voice low. "I wanted to give them a chance," Langston replied. "They failed." Doyle looked at him for a long time. "Do you want to press charges?" Langston shook his head. "Not yet." "Yet?" He nodded. "There's something bigger at stake." Doyle leaned back, folding her arms. "You're thinking exposure. I'm thinking accountability." Back at the local precinct, the captain's office door swung. "Open hard. Inside. Now," barked Captain Delaney, a thick-necked man with deep-set eyes. Reynolds and Maddox stepped in, soaked, stiff, silent. Delaney tossed a manila folder onto his desk. "You two want to explain to me why I just got a call from the Pentagon?" Reynolds started. "Sir, he matched a description." "Stop." The silence crackled. That man was Major General Langston Briggs, 3rd highest-ranking black officer in the U.S. Army. He served under 2 presidents. He trained half of our special ops. And you cuffed him in his own neighborhood. Reynolds swallowed hard. Delaney leaned forward. "Do you understand what you've done?" Maddox tried to speak, but Delaney cut him off. "You're both on administrative leave, effective immediately. And Reynolds? You better pray he doesn't press." Outside, news vans had already begun circling the station like vultures. A local blog had picked up the story, then Twitter, then national media. Decorated black general wrongfully cuffed by local officers. Pentagon intervenes. Langston hadn't said a word to the press. He didn't need to. The image of him standing in cuffs, rain falling, head held high, was enough. It went viral. One tweet read, "He survived war zones abroad, but not a routine traffic stop at home." Langston sat on his porch that night, alone. A single porch light above him. His phone buzzed with reporters, politicians, civil rights lawyers. Everyone wanted a quote. He gave none. Not yet. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure approach. It was Mrs. Laney, his elderly neighbor. She held a plastic container. "I made you cobbler," she said gently. "Saw the news." Langston smiled faintly. "Thank you, ma'am." She hesitated. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." Langston nodded. "So am I." Inside, he placed the cobbler down on the counter and finally sat. He didn't eat. He stared at the sealed envelope the agent had handed Reynolds, the one the officer never opened. Langston had a copy. Inside, A formal Pentagon memo. With 3 options: file a full complaint, go public with a statement, request a private meeting with the chief of police and the mayor. Langston circled option 3. He didn't want headlines, he wanted systems to change. The next morning, the city woke up to a headline from an unexpected source, the official U.S. Army press office, Major General Briggs to meet with city leaders. After racial profiling incident, no statement yet, military investigation opened. It sent ripples through every command chain in the country. Langston had said nothing, but his silence was now louder than any speech. Back at the station, Reynolds sat alone in an empty locker room. No badge, no gun, no partner. He looked at himself, in the mirror, and for the first time in years, he didn't recognize the man staring back. "Let me get this straight," said Mayor Connolly, folding her arms. "A 2-star general was cuffed by our officers, and now the Pentagon wants me." "In a closed-door meeting." "No, Madam Mayor," replied her assistant. "General Briggs requested the meeting, personally." The room went still. Mayor Susan Connolly, mid-50s, blonde, sharp as a blade, had seen 1,000 headlines flare and die. But this had wildfire written all over it. She turned to the chief of police, Walt Denham, seated beside her. "Your department is on the verge of collapse. Do you realize that, Walt?" Denham nodded, but his jaw stayed tight. "I'm handling it." "No, you're not," she snapped. "You let your boys profile a war hero, and now the internet's treating him like he's Martin Luther King in uniform." Denham shifted. "We didn't know who he was. And that's the problem." Meanwhile, at a secure government building in downtown D.C., Langston walked through a side entrance, unguarded, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. No medals, no fanfare, just presence. In the elevator, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. 2 city security officers stood beside him, eyes forward, breathing tight. One cleared his throat, trying to say something, but the words never came. When the elevator doors opened, Langston stepped out into a quiet hallway. A woman in a navy dress suit approached him. "General Briggs, I'm Dana Wolf, special counsel to the mayor. We're honored you came in person." Langston offered a small nod. "Let's keep it simple." Inside the room, the mayor, the police chief, Dana Wolf, and 2 internal affairs observers. Langston didn't sit right away. He placed his leather folder on the table, opened it slowly, and then looked each of them in the eyes. "I'm not here for an apology," he said. "I'm here for change." Mayor Connolly leaned in. "General, we are deeply—" Langston raised a hand. "Not rude, just final." "I've heard those words before. They don't last," Chief Denham exhaled. "What do you want?" Langston slid a paper across the table. It had 3 bullet points: immediate suspension and investigation of officers, Reynolds and Maddox. Mandatory anti-bias and de-escalation, training for all patrol officers, civilian review board for traffic stops, and use of force complaints. Denham scoffed. "That's not a small ask." "It's not a request," Langston replied. "It's a solution." Mayor Connolly studied the paper. "We'll need council approval." Langston didn't. Blink. "Then I'll speak at the next public meeting, on record, in uniform." The room tensed. Dana Wolf leaned over to the mayor and whispered, "He's got the public. He's got the press. He's got the army. If he speaks, this city's reputation tanks." Langston finally sat. Slow, deliberate. "You have until Friday," he said. "Do what's right, or I will." Across town, Reynolds sat on his porch, nursing a glass of cheap whiskey. His phone buzzed with messages from his union rep, his ex-wife, and a news channel offering 10 kale for an interview. He ignored them all. Neighborhood teen walked by, slowed down, then kept walking, but not before snapping a photo of Reynolds slouched in shame. It hit social media 20 minutes later. The cop who cuffed a general, now sitting outside like a nobody. The comments weren't kind. Reynolds stared at the sky. He'd made a career out of fear. But now, fear was sitting in his own chest. The next day, the precinct was unusually quiet. Maddox walked in to collect his things. As he packed his locker, Officer Rivera approached him. "Sorry, man," Rivera said. "But it was wrong. You know that, right?" Maddox nodded. "Yeah, I do." "You think they'll fire Reynolds?" "I think the general's not playing games." At City Hall, Mayor Connolly held an emergency session. They voted. Unanimously, every demand from Langston's list passed. Training budgets were unlocked. A civilian oversight board was created. And for the first time in 20 years, a black general had rewritten police policy without ever raising his voice. But Langston wasn't finished. He stood before a press crowd that evening. Not for attention, for accountability. He wore his dress blues, stars on his shoulders, medals across his chest. The crowd hushed. Langston stepped to the podium. "I served this country abroad for 30 years, he began, voice steady. "But yesterday reminded me that home is still the most dangerous place to wear this skin." Flashes erupted. Reporters scribbled. "But I don't want punishment," he continued. "I want protection. For the next kid, for the next father, for the next me." He didn't cry, didn't yell. He just stood tall. The press called it the quietest earthquake in American policing. But back in a dark apartment, Reynolds muttered to no one. He thinks he's untouchable. What he didn't know was that Langston Briggs wasn't untouchable. He was undeniable, and his storm was still gathering. "He's not stopping," Mayor Connolly said, pacing in her office. "He's already on CNN, and now the Pentagon's backing his reforms. We're losing control of the narrative." "You never had it," Dana Wolf replied, setting down her tablet. "General Briggs isn't just pushing policy. He's shifting power." Thursday morning brought more than rain. It brought consequences. Langston's face was now everywhere. Every network, every timeline. But it wasn't fame he wanted. It was function, and it was working. School boards were emailing the city. Local colleges wanted Langston to speak. A national veterans group announced full support for his reform initiative. And most significantly, a major civil rights coalition named him as their keynote for an upcoming Justice Summit. The ground was shifting beneath the feet of everyone who once ignored him. Meanwhile, Langston sat quietly in his study, sipping coffee. No suit today, just a navy t-shirt and sweats. The storm outside didn't bother him. He'd lived through worse. On his desk, a photo of him in uniform with his father, a Korean War vet who once told him, "The real fight begins when the war ends." Langston picked up his phone and called his lawyer. "I need every report on those two officers. Past stops, complaints, all of it." The lawyer, Tina Mercer, a sharp-tongued black woman who never lost a civil case, responded fast. "Already. Working on it," she said. "Reynolds has 4 complaints in 5 years. Maddox has 1, but he's mostly quiet." "Quiet doesn't mean clean," Langston said. "Send me what you have." She paused. "Langston, are you planning to take this further?" "I'm not planning to," he said softly. "I'm prepared to." Back at the precinct, Officer Maddox was called into internal affairs. The conference room was cold and gray, like most places built to make people squirm. Across from him sat Detective Kendra Mills, IA's best investigator. "Mr. Maddox," she began. "You've been a cop for 13 years. You've seen the tapes. You've heard the fallout. Why didn't you stop your partner?" Maddox rubbed his face. "I hesitated." "Why?" "I thought maybe I could calm him down." "Did you believe the general was dangerous?" "No," Maddox admitted. "But I didn't want to embarrass my partner." Kendra raised an eyebrow. "So you let a war hero be humiliated to protect your partner's ego?" Maddox stared down at his lap. "I didn't think it would go this far." Kendra closed her folder. "That's the problem. You never think it'll go this far, until someone like Langston Briggs makes sure it does." Across town, Langston stood in a quiet barbershop. No cameras, no press, just mirrors, razors, and truth. The barber, Jerome, a longtime friend in Vietnam, vet, looked at him through the mirror. "You really gonna bring the whole system to its knees?" Jerome asked. Langston chuckled. "No, just make it kneel long enough to look in the mirror." Jerome nodded slowly, clippers buzzing. You got folks talking, Lang. Even the ones who never cared. You got 'em listening. I don't want noise, Langston said. I want change. Outside, two young boys peeked through the glass. One whispered, "That's him. That's the soldier guy from TikTok." Langston caught their eyes. He smiled, then waved them in. They stepped in shyly, holding their phones. "Can we get a picture?" Langston knelt between them, smile warm but eyes tired. He wasn't chasing followers, but now he had a following, and with it, responsibility. Back at City Hall, Dana Wolf handed the mayor a fresh report. "This is the real problem," she said. It showed over 70 recent complaints from Black and Latino drivers stopped by the same small group of officers, Reynolds included. Mayor Connolly's face drained of color. This is a pattern," Dana nodded. "It always was. Langston just made sure we can't ignore it anymore." "We need to get ahead of this," the mayor whispered. "It's too late for that," Dana replied. "Now you need to catch up." That evening, Langston attended a closed-door community town hall. No uniform, no press, just parents, youth, elders, teachers, officers off duty and in plain clothes. A young woman stood up, early 20s, nervous. "My little brother saw you on TV," she said. "He asked if being smart and polite was enough to keep him safe." Langston didn't rush his answer. "No," he said, "but fighting back with your mind, your voice, and your truth, that gives you power. And that's why I'm doing this." Silence. Then quiet applause. Not for celebrity, for clarity. Outside, the cameras waited. But Langston didn't give interviews that night. He walked past them slowly, umbrella in hand, head high, because justice didn't need a quote, it needed a plan, and tomorrow would bring the first major blow. "Officer Reynolds," said Captain Delaney, standing at the front of the briefing room. "You've been placed on unpaid suspension, effective immediately. Turn in your badge, weapon, and cruiser keys." "What the hell is this?" Reynolds stood up fast. "This ain't due process. It's accountability," Delaney said coldly. "And it's long overdue." Reynolds stood frozen. Around him, the other officers avoided eye contact. Some shifted in their seats. Others quietly looked away. The room felt smaller now, suffocating, like the walls themselves were closing in. He tossed his badge on the table. Hard. "This is bull," he muttered, turning toward the door. "Leave your keys," Delaney added, not even glancing up. Reynolds stopped, his jaw twitching, then threw the keys down next to the badge. He walked out without a word. His footsteps echoed down the hallway like thunder. Outside, reporters were waiting. He shoved past them. Maddox watched it all from the break room window, silent. He knew it wasn't over, because Langston Briggs wasn't finished. That same morning, Langston entered a federal courtroom, not for trial but for testimony. Civil rights attorneys had filed a motion to open a Department of Justice review of the local police department, and Langston was the star witness. He didn't wear his full dress uniform. He didn't need it. His presence was enough. Across from him sat 3 federal attorneys listening, taking notes, recording every word. Behind him sat community leaders, retired military, and even a few off-duty officers brave enough to attend. Langston opened a black binder and read aloud. "This is a list of citizens stopped, searched, and humiliated by the same group of officers in this city, most of them black, all of them unarmed, none of them arrested." He looked up. "My story is not the exception, it's the example." The courtroom was still. Not a cough, not a shuffle, just truth, laid bare. After the hearing, Langston exited, through the side doors, avoiding the growing crowd. But he didn't make it far. Waiting by his car was Tina Mercer, his lawyer. In her hand, a manila envelope. "You need to see this," she said, opening it. Inside, screenshots, Officer Reynolds, leaked text messages. In one, Reynolds bragged about putting another mouthy one in cuffs. In another, he shared a selfie of a young black man he'd pulled over with the caption, "He thought he was somebody." Langston's jaw tightened. Who leaked this? He asked. Tina shrugged. Doesn't matter. It's spreading like wildfire. Your name's trending. Again, high Briggs effect. Langston didn't smile. He didn't want a hashtag. He wanted change. Across the city, in a quiet home, Reynolds stared at his phone in horror. His messages, his jokes, his private language, now public poison. The press had called. His union had called. Even his lawyer called, but none of it mattered now, because America had already judged him, and the court of public opinion didn't wait for trials. That night, Langston sat on his back porch again. No lights, just the sound of wind and trees. Across the fence, Mrs. Laney called softly, "You all right, General?" "I'm getting there," he replied. "You're doing something big," she said. "Real big." Langston looked up at the stars. "Sometimes, big feels heavy, but it also feels right," she said. The next day, the mayor stood in front of the press with the police chief and Dana Wolfe by her side. She read from a prepared statement. As of today, Officer John Reynolds has been terminated from the police force, pending civil rights charges. The city will begin an external audit of traffic stops, use of force incidents, and civilian complaints. We are also funding community oversight boards effective immediately. She looked up. We are not doing this because we were pressured. We are doing this because we were wrong. Backstage, Dana whispered to her, "That was the smartest thing you've done in your career." Mayor Connolly whispered back, "It wasn't politics. It was fear." Of Langston, of what he made us see. That evening, Langston received a quiet visitor, Officer Maddox. He stood at the porch steps, no uniform, just jeans and a coat. "I know I don't deserve your time," Maddox began, "but I need to say something." Langston nodded slowly. "Go ahead." I froze. That night. I let him do it. I could have stopped it, and I didn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just truth. Langston didn't move. "You ever stand by and watch someone bleed?" he asked. Maddox swallowed. "No, I have," Langston said. "In war, in neighborhoods, on streets, and every time the bystander thinks silence is safer." He stepped closer. "But silence is a choice, and you chose wrong." Maddox nodded, tears forming. "I'm sorry, sir." Langston didn't offer comfort. He offered something rarer, a second chance. "You want to fix it? Help pass the training bill, use your name, testify, speak." "I will," Maddox whispered. Langston walked back inside, and this time left the door cracked open. "You mean to tell me we ignored 19 complaints about this guy?" barked Councilman Brewer, holding up a folder. "And we never flagged Reynolds for bias." "Sir, the reports were never escalated," said the internal auditor, her voice shaking. "They were marked resolved by his own supervisor." The council chamber was packed. City officials, reporters, activists, and off-duty officers filled the rows. The spotlight had moved from Langston's humiliation to the system that enabled it. That morning, a special session convened to review every complaint dismissed in the last 5 years. What they found was damning. 40% of excessive force complaints came from Black or Latino residents. Only one officer had ever been suspended. Reynolds' name appeared 18 times. The crowd didn't gasp, they just listened. And that was worse, because now no one could say they didn't know. Meanwhile, across the city, Langston walked through the Veterans Resource Center, welcomed like a legend. A young man in fatigue stepped up. "Sir, I saw your hearing. It gave me something I didn't know I needed." Langston put a hand on his shoulder. "You've always had it, you just forgot." He turned to the rest of the vets in the room. "This fight's different, but the mission's the same. Serve, protect, uplift." Phones came out. Applause followed, but Langston didn't linger. He wasn't here for applause. He was planting seeds. Later that day, Dana Wolfe met with the mayor behind closed doors. "We have a leak in the department," Dana said. "And I think it's on purpose." A whistleblower? Dana nodded. Someone inside's feeding Langston's team everything. Training logs, complaint cover-ups, even body cam clips. The mayor leaned back in her chair. He's bleeding them out, one by one. No, Dana said. He's exposing them. They're bleeding themselves. Across town, Langston sat with Tina Mercer, scrolling through. New evidence. One clip showed Reynolds laughing after a stop. Another showed him yelling at a teen. The files kept coming. Where's this all coming from? Langston asked. Tina smiled. A rookie detective, young black woman, used to idolize you. She's been quietly pulling records from the archives. Langston blinked. She said you gave her the courage. He sat back, eyes distant. This wasn't revenge, it was reckoning. Back at the precinct, 3 more officers were placed on leave. News cameras caught them leaving the building, faces hidden, heads down. Twitter erupted again. Reynolds wasn't alone. Briggs effect. The department is falling apart. Good. Maddox watched it all unfold from his apartment. His phone buzzed. Email from Tina Mercer. Subject, testimony request, civilian oversight hearing. Maddox stared at it for a long time, then clicked reply. Yes, I'll speak. That night, Langston attended a candlelight vigil outside City Hall. Hundreds gathered, no microphones, no speeches, just candles, silence, and strength. A little boy, no older than 10, walked up and tugged Langston's sleeve. Are you the man? Who changed the rules? Langston knelt down. No, son, he said softly. I'm just the man who refused to stay quiet. The boy smiled, holding his candle tighter, and Langston saw it in his eyes. Hope. Not loud, not flashy, but real. The kind of hope that made men like Reynolds sweat. Because it didn't go away. It grew. That same night, far from the candles, Reynolds sat alone in a motel room, his face gaunt, his phone dead. He stared at the television playing Langston's CNN interview on loop. I didn't want to become the face of this, Langston had said. But maybe it's time we all stop looking, away. Reynolds turned the volume down, then off. The silence didn't comfort him. It condemned him. And the truth? It was louder than any siren. You hear what they just announced? Said Officer Rivera, slamming his locker shut. Internal Affairs is investigating everyone connected to Reynolds' old unit. They're not stopping at the street cops, muttered another. Supervisors, training staff, even dispatch is under review now. That general's not just fighting back, he's dismantling the whole tree. The precinct felt different now, quieter. Every hallway felt like a tightrope. Every officer wondered if they were next. And every eye watched the news instead of the patrol board. Because what Langston Briggs had started was no longer a scandal. It was a movement. That morning, Langston arrived at the state capitol for a televised roundtable on law enforcement accountability. A long wooden table stretched across the hearing chamber, filled with officials from across the state. But Langston didn't enter with a crowd. He walked in alone. The room fell silent, and when he took his seat, even the most skeptical faces gave him their full attention. One of the senators leaned forward. General Briggs, what's your ultimate goal here? Langston answered without pause. Transparency, education, and systems that don't need a uniform to respect a black man. The cameras rolled, the country watched. Meanwhile, in a quiet coffee shop across town, Dana Wolf sat with a former officer, one who quit 2 years ago after blowing the whistle on excessive force. This is your chance, Dana said, sliding over a tablet. Langston's testimony opened the door. If you speak now, it won't just be your word. It'll be proof. The man, nervous, mid-40s, wiped his palms on his jeans. You think anyone will believe me now? Dana leaned in. They already do. He nodded and signed his name to the witness list. Back at the precinct, Maddox stood before a small group of rookies in the training room. His voice was steady, if a little unsure. I froze that night. That was my mistake. But it won't be yours. One of the young officers asked, What changed you? Maddox looked out the window, then answered, "Briggs didn't scream, didn't threaten. He just stood there and made us see who we really were." He turned back to them. "You're gonna wear that badge? Then earn it." The rookies sat still, not blinking. Something was changing, and they knew it. Later that day, the mayor and Chief Denham stood before a podium, announcing sweeping changes. All traffic stops must now be logged and reviewed within 48 hours. Third-party firm would handle racial bias training. Body cams must stay active during entire interactions, with consequences for violations. Then came the headline, "Briggs Reforms Approved. First Civilian Oversight Committee begins next week." Across the city, barbershops, churches, classrooms, and street corners buzzed with the same topic. He made them blink. He didn't burn it down. He rebuilt it. And he did it without cussing or chaos. But while the city praised Langston's restraint, not everyone admired it. Inside a private law office, a group of former officers gathered, angry, cornered, embittered. "This whole thing's political," one of them growled. "We did our jobs." "No," said another. "Older and sharper, we got sloppy. And now we're losing the ground we built." A third leaned in, voice low. "We file a suit. Defamation, discrimination, say he's targeting us." The first laughed. "You gonna sue a war hero on national TV? Good luck." They didn't know it yet, but every move they made now was being watched. Langston had friends in places they didn't imagine, and enemies who used to be silent were finally speaking. That evening, Langston visited his father's grave. Rain fell lightly. He placed a small stone on the headstone, a quiet military tradition of remembrance. "I didn't ask for this," he said softly. "But I know what you'd say." He looked up, eyes steady. "You either stand for something, or you watch it fall." And Langston wasn't watching anything fall. Not anymore. He was lifting the whole thing up, even if he had to do it alone. "You're the one who sent those files, aren't you?" Dana Wolf asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," said the young woman, barely out of her 20s. "Detective Imani Charles. I couldn't keep quiet anymore." "You just changed this entire city," Dana whispered. "You realize that?" They stood in a dimly lit hallway inside the city archives building. Fluorescent lights flickered above them. Stacks of internal records sat on rolling carts behind Detective Charles. Body cam files, complaint reports, training videos, redacted, personnel folders. She had been pulling them, quietly, carefully for weeks, and feeding them straight to Langston's lawyer. "I grew up 3 blocks from where they stopped General Briggs," Imani said. "My older brother got roughed up by one of Reynolds' old partners when he was 16. That night with the general, that was my last straw." Dana looked at her closely. "You ever scared someone would find out?" "Every day. But you still did it. Because people like Briggs don't happen twice." Dana smiled almost proudly. "You're not a leak. You're a lighthouse." The next morning, Imani Charles became the anonymous source quoted in a viral New York Times op-ed, titled, "The Woman Who Dismantled a Department, One File at a Time." Langston read the article from his living room, his hands steady, his coffee untouched. He didn't know her name, but he felt her bravery like a rising tide. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, the fallout worsened. 2 captains were suspended. A sergeant resigned. The internal training manual was pulled for federal review. The department's public trust score had dropped by 48% in just 3 weeks. And yet, amid all this chaos, something new was growing. Community members began meeting with officers in weekly forums. Youths enrolled in new mentorship programs led by off-duty military. For the first time in a decade, the city was talking. Really talking. That afternoon, Langston stood at a podium inside a local high school gymnasium, speaking to students from 3 different schools. "You all are the next line," he said. "Not soldiers, not cops, citizens. And citizens don't stay quiet when they see wrong." A hand went up. A student asked, "What made you not fight back that night? I mean, why not yell?" Langston smiled gently. "Because silence can cut." Louder than shouting when it's backed by truth. That quote went viral within hours. It became a mural by Friday downtown. 10 feet tall, Langston's face, his quote beneath it, and rows of candles left at its base. But while the city healed, Reynolds unraveled. Hiding out in a distant town, living off severance and fear, he was approached by a former contact. Someone, in media, they offered him a seat on a right-wing podcast, $15,000. No hard questions, just a chance to spin. Reynolds agreed. The episode aired that weekend. He called Langston a manipulator, claimed the stop was by the book, accused the city of using him as a sacrificial lamb for politics. But the damage was already done, and the world had already chosen. That night, the podcast trended, for all the wrong reasons. Clips of Langston standing calmly in the rain were stitched side by side with Reynolds' rant, side by side with the footage Imani had leaked, side by side with Reynolds' own text messages. There was no debate anymore, just evidence, just truth. And the truth was a tsunami. The next morning, Langston received a call, blocked number. He answered, a voice, quiet, tired. "General, this is Officer Maddox. I know we spoke once. I've been thinking, maybe we could build something, with the community, with the rookies." Langston said nothing for a moment. Then, "I'm listening," because this was the part no one expected. Langston wasn't just tearing down injustice, he was rebuilding trust. One file, one room, one officer at a time, and behind him, a city rising. "Sir, the secretary is ready for you," said the aide, opening the tall double doors. "Tell her I won't be long," Langston replied, straightening his cuffs. "Just here to deliver one last thing." Inside the Pentagon, everything echoed. Footsteps, clipped conversations, the hum of fluorescent lights above. It wasn't Langston's first time here, but it felt different now. He wasn't here in uniform. He was here with purpose. He stepped into the oak-paneled office of Secretary of Defense Natalie Rowe, one of the most powerful women in the country. She stood when he entered. "Langston," she said with a half-smile. "Or should I say, the man who made half the country reevaluate their police force." "I didn't ask for that," he replied, "but I won't run from it either." She nodded. They sat across from each other, sunlight casting long lines through the blinds behind her desk. Rowe opened a folder between them. "You've rattled the brass, Briggs, and the brass don't rattle easy." Langston kept his voice level. "Then maybe they needed to." Rowe studied him for a moment. Then she handed him a formal letter, embossed, signed, stamped, request for early retirement. Langston looked down at it. "You sure about this?" she asked. He nodded. 32 years. I've given them all I had. But there's a bigger mission now, and I can't lead it from behind a desk." Rowe leaned back, folding her arms. "So what's next? Politics?" "No," he said. "Not politics. People." She smiled faintly. "Well, when people like you lead, people listen." As Langston stood to leave, she added softly, "The Pentagon may be losing a general, but this country just gained a warrior." He gave a slight bow of respect and walked out. Outside the building, reporters waited. Langston didn't speak. He simply held up the sealed retirement folder. The flashbulbs went wild. Within hours, headlines flooded every major network. "General Langston Briggs retires, will lead National Civilian Accountability Initiative. From battlefield to boardroom, Briggs launches new era in civil rights oversight. Hero of justice, military veteran steps into civilian reform leadership role." But while the media exploded, Langston went quiet. Back in the city, he met with Maddox, Dana Wolfe, Tina Mercer, and Imani Charles in a quiet community hall. They sat around a folding table. No cameras, no podiums, just a whiteboard, some coffee, and 5 people who'd once stood on opposite sides of power. Maddox had a folder in front of him. "I've been working with the rookies," he said. "They want real training. They don't want to be Reynolds. They just don't know how to do it better." Langston nodded. "Then we give them a new blueprint." Tina spoke next. The DOJ's launching task forces in 3 more cities. They want your model. Same review boards, same policies. Dana added, and we've got tech partners offering to build real-time stop tracking, automatic flagging, no more reports. Disappearing. Langston glanced around the table. These weren't politicians, they were builders, and they were ready. Imani leaned forward. I've got one request, she said. Before we get too big, can we promise something? What's that? Langston asked. No forgetting who it started with. A man in cuffs, standing in the rain, who didn't shout, who didn't break, who just refused to bow. Langston met her eyes. I'll never forget. Outside it began to rain again, but this time, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like renewal. Back in his neighborhood, porch lights flicked on. Mrs. Laney waved from her window. Kids rode their bikes. Past his house, pointing, "That's him! That's the general." Langston stepped out onto his porch, not as a soldier, not as a symbol, but as a man who had changed the direction of an entire system, by standing still when the world expected him to fold. The final reforms would be announced tomorrow. The last name suspended. The city forever changed. But tonight belonged to silence and a long breath of peace. We are gathered here today, said Mayor Connolly into the microphone, to announce the official launch of the Briggs Civilian Oversight Act, named for the man who made this impossible moment inevitable. The crowd rose to their feet in applause, and at the center of it all, Langston Briggs stood, hands folded, eyes calm, heart full. The city plaza buzzed with energy. Cameras lined the sidewalks. Families held homemade signs. Students wore T-shirts, with Langston's quote printed across the front. Silence can cut louder than shouting when it's backed by truth. On the stage behind the mayor sat Dana Wolfe, Tina Mercer, Officer Maddox, Detective Imani Charles, and several members of the newly formed Civilian Oversight Committee. Half of them civilians, half reform-minded officers. This wasn't a press stunt. It was a blueprint. As the applause died down, Langston took the mic. No fanfare, no speechwriters, just truth. When they cuffed me that night, he began, they didn't see a soldier, or a father, or a neighbor. They saw a threat. He paused, but today they see something else. They see change. The crowd fell completely silent. Langston scanned the faces before him. Black, white, young, old, cops and kids. I didn't ask for this. I didn't seek the spotlight. But I stood still in it because someone had to. Today, that someone is all of us. He stepped back. No flourish. No raised fist. Just impact. That night, news anchors called it the Turning Point Rally. Civil rights leaders called Langston the bridge between 2 generations of justice. And in homes across the country, parents told their children, that's how you change a system, not with rage, with resilience. Later that evening, Langston walked the empty hallway of the old precinct. It was quiet now, reformed, renamed, restructured. On one wall was a framed image, Langston in cuffs, rain dripping from his brow, back straight, eyes forward. Beside it was a plaque that read, "This department reformed because one man didn't." Flinch. As he stood there, Maddox approached. "They want to name the new academy after you," he said. Langston shook his head. "Name it after the ones still coming, the ones we still have to protect." Maddox smiled. "You always gotta be the quiet one, huh?" Langston turned to him. "Sometimes the loudest man in the room is the one who just refuses to sit down." Outside, the city lights glowed softer. Children played in the streets again. A young black boy rode by on his bike, saluted Langston, with 2 fingers. Langston returned the salute. Not as a soldier, as a symbol. As proof that one moment of restraint could ignite a movement of reform. As he walked home that night, past the mural, past the candles, past the whispers of a city forever changed, Langston Briggs didn't think about revenge. He thought about restoration. Not every storm destroys. Some clean the air, and some, like Langston, become legends not because they shouted, but because they stood tall while the world finally listened.